Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to speak with you this morning as I intend to give you my thoughts concerning safety, the reality in which we live, and the choices we make in order to make us feel safe. I might add that I feel safe standing up here. This is my safe place, as I consider all of you my friends. And I hope the visitors here today will discover that they have friends here in this place that they didn't even know they had. Recently, I was asked if I had a normal childhood. The question caught me off guard, and I immediately tried to think of a baseline. My first thoughts went to the Cleavers. You might remember Ward and June and Wally and Beaver. A family that was understanding, reasonable, and always had good answers for problem solving. The person asking me that question was a young Hispanic female. I use this description to emphasize that she and I come from entirely different perspectives. I didn't think she would equate to my Leave It to Beaver analogy or even remember the show. So my response was truthful. That being, if having your home you were raised in struck by lightning so the internal wiring stuck out of the walls, or having a knife held to your throat, or being threatened by a person with a gun, or knowing that the alcoholic across the street hung himself in the garage, and another neighbor shot his wife 9 times before he killed himself, all before reaching the age of 12, was a normal childhood, then yes, I did have a normal childhood. She told me I did not, and hopefully thought better of her circumstances. But as horrid as my description of my childhood memories are, I have a friend of mine here in Houston whose father was assassinated when she was 9. The reason? Because he was the first black sheriff deputy in a Louisiana parish. So while I was playing in the dirt, pushing trucks around, she was dealing with something far worse than anything I experienced. My point being that everybody has threats to their safety and what they consider a safe environment. Their basis for what safety is built upon their life experiences, expectations, their knowledge of self, their surroundings, and how prepared they are. Thinking about my answer now, I can see that I equated normal to living in a safe environment. I believe I was brought up in a safe environment despite what happened. After all, what does a kid know about safety? Any new experience could be seen as just a different life challenge based on environment and social input. Now I'm wondering if that question can be applied to the country we live in. Are we normal? Are we safe? I believe the violence I experienced was due to natural occurrences or psychological sicknesses, while the violence my friend experienced was the result of an agenda. Throughout my lifetime, I have seen the results of agendas. The bombing of a church in Birmingham, civil rights and political leaders assassinated, wars, riots, and as of late, a barrage of mass shootings in churches, schools, nightclubs, and places where we shop. We cannot at this time rule out the violence in Ukraine or what is happening in the Middle East. The uptick of natural disaster also plays into our concept of being safe. We are filled with so much information that can affect our concept of safety. Each bit of information adds to the ecology of what it takes for you to reach a comfort level, just as the information I received is what sent me down this rabbit hole to prepare this service. This is not to say that news isn't filled with good things, just like my childhood wasn't just filled with negative occurrences. But now this summer, a UU church was firebombed in Plano, Texas, and that hits pretty close to home, our home. If you're not aware, authorities in Plano, Texas investigated what they called an intentionally set fire at the Community Unitarian Universalist Church in Plano, Texas in July of 2023, just weeks after it was targeted with criticism in a video by an anti-LGBTQ Christian YouTuber. The church members refer to the incident as a firebomb due to the incendiary device placed at the front door. Prior to the fire, men filmed themselves visiting the Plano church, asking the congregation about their beliefs, and in the words of the UUs, pretending to be LGBTQ, with the goal of testing the church's theology and exposing false teachers. During the service, Christian YouTubers interrupted by yelling, "Save the children." At the end of the YouTube video, which has been viewed more than 200,000 times, the Christian YouTubers stand by the church sign and ask viewers to pray for these people, calling the church pagan and satanic. In reaction to this incident, the UUA, along with its Stand Up for Racial Justice, organized a two-part seminar based on the Jewish Bridge Project to offer guidance in confronting this type of violence. The Jewish Bridge Project is home to Jewish Justice Circle education, queer ritual, and engaged community action. During the seminar, these questions were asked. Why are faith communities being targeted? Christian dominance, and why does it matter? What is Christian nationalism, authoritarianism, and fascism? And finally, what is safety? The question number one, why are faith communities being targeted? The answer to this question surprised me with its simplicity. The answer given is that the congregations are targeted due to their solidarity with groups that have always been attacked: minorities, LGBTQ, people with health issues, injustices, environmental issues, immigration issues, economic inequities. In our case, the 8 principles, and foremost, that we respect the worth and dignity of every person. The people behind the assaults are trying to keep us out of solidarity. It was suggested that the congregations cannot depend on the legal system and need to have their own plans in place. Often, law enforcement can be complicit in these attacks just by the lack of a response, not recognizing the threat, or actually being sympathetic to the attacker's cause. The Southern Poverty Law Center has echoed this and reported how white supremacy has infiltrated law enforcement, the military, and we have seen firsthand that politicians can be the leaders, but we can depend on each other. Question 2, Christian dominance and why it matters. There is a set system of Christian culture and beliefs that dominate all aspects of U.S. society. The ideology that Christians are directed by God to take over the world benefits all Christians and those passing as Christians. We see it in missionary work, prayer in the classroom, the 10 Commandments in public places, and the fear that the secular is attacking Christian holidays and the fabric of our country itself. Throughout our history, power and wealth has accumulated by predominantly Christian ruling class. Ideas supporting manifest destiny and the passage of tax exemption laws are examples of the way that wealth has accumulated. Chris Tomlinson in the Houston Chronicle takes it even further by stating that powerful people with financial interests vulnerable to human progress want voters to elect backward politicians who protect their profits. But Christian dominance can be further broken down into three levels: individual beliefs, the absorption of ideologies of superiority. Number two, ministries, the idea of one truth, assumption of Christian missionaries that all should be Christian. Blaming bad times on the lack of faith or not following faith traditions. Examples could be homosexuals causes mudslides, or liberals are destroying the families. The third is institutional. Laws created by those in power that create disadvantages such as women's wages, redlining, taking an oath on a Bible, and backing religious freedom laws, which equates to the right to discriminate. Deep realization over the centuries in history shows Christian dominance supports oppression, original sin, one truth, and colonialism. All levels support and reinforce Christian men as leaders. We can see it in economics, politics, the environmental laws, safety, and in safety in general. Lately, we have leaders saying only Christians should be in the leadership roles. Our new leader in the House says that his worldview comes from the Bible. This is not to say that Christians are our enemies, but they are those that put on the cloak of Christianity to achieve goals that you will not find in Christian doctrine. I'm addressing Christian organizations that promote Christian nationalism, authoritarianism, and fascism. And that brings me to the third question. What is Christian nationalism, authoritarianism, and fascism? Christian nationalism is a type of religious nationalism that is affiliated with Christianity, which primarily focuses on the internal politics of society, such as legislating civil and criminal law that reflect their view of Christianity and their role of religion in political and social life. Christian nationalism supports the presence of Christian symbols in public squares and the state patronage for the practice and display of religion, such as school prayer, the exhibition of nativity scenes during Christmastide, and the Christian cross on Good Friday. In doing so, Christian nationalism draws political support from the broader Christian population to the right of the political spectrum of our country. Authoritarianism is the enforcement or advocacy of strict obedience to authority at the expense of personal freedom, and shows lack of concern for the wishes and opinions of others. It is highlighted by the power of a society in the hands of a small group, known as an undemocratic practice, misuses the power of the state, and subverts democratic norms. Fascism is an authoritarian, nationalist, right-wing system of government and social organization. It is extremely authoritarian, intolerant, and displays oppressive ideas or behavior. It has domineering views and practices. Each of these organizations form fronts of legitimacy, such as the Christian nationalists, white nationalists, Christian Zionists, to gain acceptance and promote their ideologies. They form sub-organizations and think tanks to develop strategies. These subgroups have non-threatening names and appear to be inclusive to all Christians and sympathizers. They promote the idea that Christianity is under attack. It may be hard to differentiate in the rhetoric, the intentions, but the actions tell the story. It's easy to see. If you know anything about the teachings of Jesus, you will know that this is not Jesus' happy way. The good news is those to the left of the extreme right outnumber them. So that brings us to what is safety? To answer that question, we might ask, what does safety feel like in your body? My answer is calm, carefree, and control of my thoughts. In contrast, what does not feeling safe in your body feel like? Perhaps a heightened awareness, rigidity, and fear. We all have different levels of comfort and ideas of what safety is to us. As I have said previously, each of us will react differently when confronted by a safety issue, whether it's a cut finger, physical assault, or any number of disturbances in our lives. During this Zoom seminar, participants were sent to the chat rooms for a one-on-one experience to address these questions of safety. We were instructed to give our answers to the other person and listen to their answers. I gave my response and then listened for the response from my assigned partner. This partner I was assigned to was a member of the UU Church in Plano that was firebombed. The response from them was that he no longer felt safe. It made me realize that it was far easier to talk about victimization than actually talk to a victim. At the church in Plano, prior to the bombing, they had visitors to the church who seemed occupied in taking pictures of their building and surroundings. They interrupted the service by yelling, "Save the children." And when confronted, the congregation realized that they were also being filmed. It is my understanding that from these witnesses that the filming is a way to document the response and also used as evidence in the event the perpetrators are harmed. These videos are used in lawsuits, and the use of any monetary awards are used to fund their cause. They are organized, sophisticated, and diabolical. Since the bombing, guards and police have been hired to stand by during their service, and they have posted signs indicating that no filming will be allowed without permission. Also during the seminar, we were told more about the concept of safety, and it was explained this way. If you can envision 3 circles, one inside the other, the center circle is your comfort zone. In this zone, nothing much happens. It can be boring, an experience of things being easy in a time when very little is learned. The next circle is your discomfort zone. Here things are interesting, with interactions often happening fast and too involved. Here you learn a lot due to all the interactions. The outer circle of is your alarm zone. Here you are terrified. This is a zone where Richard Pryor explained in incidents such as these, snakes make people run into trees. You lose control. Nothing is learned here in this zone, and most times you freeze. Again, safety is often confused with comfort. Feeling unsafe and being unsafe are 2 different things. How many of you choose to do something unsafe because you feel safe doing it? None of us, right? But driving over the speed limit, using a chair instead of a ladder, or something as simple as having another helping of pie puts us at risk. Then we say later it was an accident, or a mishap, or of course somebody else's fault. What do we do to feel safe? Well, that also is relative to the person. My new friend in Plano no longer feels safe going to service. Well, I do. Historically, we know white safety has been perceived totally different for non-whites. Where whites see assurances when a police officer arrives, non-whites may be moved into their discomfort zones. But no matter the faith, the race, or the location, throughout history, churches have been sanctuaries, the safe place. Just as this is our safe place, vulnerable as we are, exposed to the world. The only thing we can do to secure the feeling of safety is to prepare as best we can, to think of the worst possible outcomes and mitigate the results. Take note of who is walking in the door. If you haven't met a new member, take time to greet them and become familiar. Beware of our surroundings. I know it's cliche now, but if you see something, say something. The first step for safety, whether here or at home, is to make an assessment. Where are you at risk, and what will you do? What are your strengths and your resources? Probably the biggest challenge is to change our mindset from going into an inactive panic mode to a responsive learning mode. Think about what you would do in a confrontation, not only here, but in the parking lots, stores, and public places. In preparing this presentation, I took a 50-question security survey put together by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, just to see how we stood as a congregation. We did not have high marks. We failed to have a security team, a security procedure, security drills, and the list goes on and on. We did have strengths, and those were with our financial procedures, exterior lighting, security cameras, and alarm systems. You also may be aware that I invited a representative from the Houston Police Department to come here to do a safety assessment of our building and grounds. He also concluded that we did have strengths: exterior lighting, cameras, alarm system, locked doors, and he did make some recommendations about adding more cameras, parking lot lighting, security access lists, and limiting access to the backyard, also known as fencing. It was interesting to me that he thought all the windows were an asset because you could see people coming to your building, while I thought of them as an opposite of how vulnerable we are to somebody looking in. All this assessment also questioned site access, building access, and background checks, which brings to mind the question of whether becoming a welcoming community is conflicting with being a safe community. I personally do not believe in fences, special access by checking purses or coats make for a welcoming community. I do not propose that a visit to the fellowship be compared to going through the airport. I like it that public can come to our grounds as a respite from the city. I often see people sitting outside in our yard, walking their dogs, or using the labyrinth during meditation. But we can be assured, like the shepherd in our time for all, we need to know who is in our flock. That takes all of us to be vigilant to reduce our risk. So after all the assessment, we need to ask what the fear responses do you practice? Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? Do we hit, yell, attack, or deflect if we are fighters? Do we remove ourselves if we are flighters? I know from experience that I'll need some warning to get a head start if I'm expected to flight. Do we freeze on the spot and try to disconnect ourselves from the situation, posing as we are not here and hoping the situation will go away? Or do we fawn, trying to appease or make the situation less overbearing? There are no wrong answers. One of the most brilliant examples of a good reaction that I witnessed, and you may have been here too, was when many years ago a man in a black duster stood in the back of the room with a Bible in his hand and condemned us all to hell. While all the ranting was going on, our demure Ms. Dodie McClellar stood and said, "Let's sing a song." What a great deterrent that was, and it gave others time to flock toward the disturbance and guide him out as he lost momentum and left. Dodie, you're my hero. No matter what our fear levels are, we need to talk about it with others. It's a hard subject, no doubt. I watched a series about the American buffalo recently, and I was taken by the statement that buffalo always face the storm rather than being driven by it. We too need to summon that courage to address and share our thoughts about fears head on with each other to enable us to know how each of us will possibly react. There are many more levels of do's and don'ts, but the big takeaway is that we are a community and we need to act accordingly. We must be like the trees outside these windows, standing together, supporting each other, our roots bound together. What have I told you today has been a difficult subject, and with harsh truths and a call to embrace the reality we must face. So in the end, do we give up an illusion of safety and adhere to our principles while remaining open, welcoming, and free? Or do we give up some freedoms to ensure we have an illusion of safety? Thank you.